Welcome to the deep dive. Looks like we're diving into the secrets of success today, huh? You've given us a really interesting mix of stuff to work with.
Yeah, some chapters from Amanda Dewinter's book, The Success Code, and a few research papers, too, all about ambition and learning and mindset.
It's funny, we talk about success as this thing to achieve, this kind of external goal.
Right, but DeWinter really gets into how much of it is actually, internal, all about how our brains work and how we approach things.
Yeah. She starts off by saying, define success on your own WN terms.
Mm.
What do you think of that? Is it really that simple?
It sounds simple, but honestly, it's kind of profound. When you think about it, so many of us are chasing goals we've inherited.
Oh, totally. Like from parents or society or just...
Exactly. Comparing ourselves to everyone else. De Winter's like, hold on, what would make you feel successful? Like, what kind of life do you want?
That's a good point. It's so easy to get caught up in that comparison game, especially these days when everyone's like broadcasting their achievements all the time.
Right. And she tells this really amazing story about Mimi Beard. She went from being homeless at 16 to having this amazing career in accounting.
That story is incredible. What
Yeah.
did you think when you read that?
It just shows you, circumstances don't have to define you. It's so easy to get discouraged when things are tough, but Mimi shows that with resilience and a clear vision for the future, you can achieve amazing things. It all comes down to that internal drive.
And speaking of drive, De Winter talks a lot about ambition, which is a word that, I don't know, gets a bad rap sometimes, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like people think it's selfish or greedy to be ambitious.
But De Winter really makes a case for ambition being essential for a fulfilling life.
Yeah, she kind of reframes it as a force for good, Like the fuel that propels us forward helps us reach our full potential.
Or just blind ambition, though, right?
No, no, not at all. It's about finding that sweet spot between drive and contentment, figuring out what optimally ambitious means for each of us.
I love that. Optimally ambitious. So you figured out your own definition of success. You're feeling ambitious. What's next? Goals, right?
Exactly, and De Winter is all about SMART goals.
Specific, measurable, actionable, realistic, time-bound. I've heard of these, but is it really the best way to set goals?
I mean, there's a reason it's become such a popular framework. It forces you to get really clear about what you want and how you're going to get there. She gives some really good examples in the book, like how to apply SMART goals to, say, job hunting or applying to university or even training for a marathon.
Okay, so we've got our goals, we're feeling good, but what about when, self-doubt creeps in? Or you hit a roadblock and start questioning yourself?
Ah, that's where mindset comes in. This is where De Winter leans heavily on Carol Dweck's research on fixed versus growth mindset. Have you heard of this?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It's that idea that people approach challenges with either a fixed mindset, thinking their abilities are set in stone, or a growth mindset, believing they can, like, develop and improve.
Right. And, De Winter talks a lot about positive self-talk, which I know it can sound a little cheesy,
Yeah.
but the research actually backs it up. That inner voice we all have can either be our biggest cheerleader or our harshest critic.
It's true. I definitely have both of those voices in my head.
De Winter calls it swapping victim language for champion language. So instead of saying, I'm terrible at this, you'd say, this is a challenge, but I'm determined to figure it out.
Oh, I like that. Okay, mindset is huge. But what about talent? Are some people just born with more natural abilities than others? It can be discouraging to think about sometimes.
It can, but De Winter kind of takes on that whole myth of genius thing head on.
Right. I was curious about that. What does she say about that?
She talks about Anders Ericsson's research on violinists. He found that the best violinists had all practiced for over 10,000 hours by the time they were 20.
Wow. That's a lot of practice.
It is. And it just shows that consistent effort and deliberate practice that trumps natural ability every time.
So basically, we're not limited by our talents, but by how much work we're willing to put in. So does that mean anyone can become more intelligent? Literally.
That's exactly what the research suggests. Learning actually changes the structure of your brain. The more we learn, the more neural connections we form, the more adaptable and resilient our brains become. And there's even this fascinating link between education and longevity.
Really.
People with more education tend to live longer, even
Yeah.
more so than those with higher incomes.
So learning is key. Got it. But how do we learn effectively with so much information out there? It can be so overwhelming.
De Winter breaks down how our brains learn, explaining the difference between working memory, that's the short-term holding space, and long-term memory, where information is stored for the long haul.
Okay, makes sense. So how do we actually move information from short-term to long-term memory?
One of the most effective techniques is called retrieval practice. It's about actively recalling information instead of passively rereading it.
Like flashcards or quizzes.
Exactly. Even just trying to explain a concept to someone else. And spacing out your practice sessions, mixing up topics, that helps to solidify those neural connections too.
So cramming the night before a test is probably not the best approach.
Not ideal. It's much better to space out your learning over time. And, some people are visual learners, others prefer to listen, some like to take notes.
So use different methods.
Exactly. DeWinter calls this dual coding, combining words and visuals to understand and remember things better. Like you might draw a diagram or create a mind map. Even just use different colored pens when you're taking notes, engaging different parts of your brain.
That makes sense. All right, so we've talked about learning, but let's talk about something we all experience. Stress.
Ah, stress, the constant companion.
Right. I'm already feeling stressed thinking about everything we have to do to be successful. But DeWinter actually has some surprising things to say about stress.
She talks about Kelly McGonigal's research on the stress paradox. Turns out stress isn't always the enemy we make it out to be. In fact, when we view it as a challenge instead of a threat, stress can actually be beneficial.
Wait, really? I always thought stress was just bad, period. How could it possibly be good?
Well, McGonigal's research showed that people who reported higher levels of stress actually had lower mortality rates.
That seems counterintuitive.
It does, right. But the key is how we perceive and respond to stress. If we see it as a sign that we're growing and challenging ourselves, it can actually energize us and make us more resilient.
So it's a mindset thing. Instead of, oh no, I'm so stressed, it's, okay, I'm being challenged, this is helping me grow.
Exactly. And she tells this amazing story about Admiral James Stockdale, who was a prisoner of war in Vietnam.
Oh yeah, I remember reading about him. What was it about his story?
He managed to maintain a sense of control and purpose even in the most horrible circumstances. Focused on what he could control, found small victories to celebrate, and just kept believing he'd eventually be free. It's a powerful example of how mindset can influence our ability to not just cope with stress, but even thrive in the face of it.
That's incredible. Okay, so we've covered defining success, ambition, mindset, learning, and even reframing stress. Yeah. What else is part of this success code?
Well, there's one more piece that's absolutely crucial, and that's sleep.
Sleep. Isn't that just wasted time?
You might think so, but I think you'll be surprised by what the research says about the power of sleep.
All right, let's dive into the world of sleep then and see what secrets it holds.
So we were just talking about sleep, which, let's be honest, a lot of us probably don't think of as a key ingredient for success. We tend to see it as, well, time we could be using for something more productive.
Yeah, guilty as charged. I've definitely pulled a few all-nighters thinking I was getting ahead, but maybe that wasn't so smart after all.
Well, that's what's so fascinating about the research DeWinter brings up. It really challenges that sleep is for the weak mentality. She highlights the work of Matthew Walker, a real leader in sleep science. One of his studies found that sleep-deprived people were 40% worse at forming new memories.
40%? That's crazy.
It is. And when you think about it, so much of what we do to achieve our goals relies on learning new things, remembering information. So if you're not sleeping enough, you're basically undermining all that effort.
It's like trying to build a house without a solid foundation.
Exactly. And it's not just about how many hours you're clocking either. The quality of your sleep is super important too. You ever had those aha moments where a solution to a problem just pops into your head or you suddenly get a burst of creativity?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Those are way more likely to happen after you've had a good night's sleep, especially during REM sleep. That's when our brains are really busy processing and consolidating information.
So it's like sleep is the secret sauce that lets all those other success strategies actually work. If you're skimping on sleep, you're basically shortchanging yourself on everything else you're doing to reach your goals.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So maybe take a minute and think about your own sleep habits. Are you getting enough? Are you prioritizing quality sleep? It seems like such a simple thing, but it can really make or break your ability to achieve what you want.
Definitely food for thought. Okay, let's shift gears a bit and talk about something else I know I personally struggle with, and I bet a lot of our listeners do too. Habits.
Ah, habits, the double-edged sword.
Right. We all know willpower is limited, but habits are like this amazing superpower that can automate our actions and free up so much mental energy. How does DeWinter connect habits to success?
Well, she points out that successful people are often masters of habit formation. They've figured out how to design their environment and their routines to support the habits they want to develop. So even when motivation is low, they're more likely to make good choices because it's almost automatic.
It's like carving a path through the woods. The more you walk that path, the easier it becomes to follow. Eventually, you don't even have to think about it. You just naturally walk that way.
Exactly. It becomes the path of least resistance. And one of the best tips DeWinter offers is to design your environment to support your desired habits. Make it easy to do the right thing and harder to do the wrong thing.
That sounds so simple, but is it really that effective?
It really is. Think about it. Let's say you want to eat healthier. Instead of relying on willpower to resist all those tempting snacks every time you open the pantry, what if you rearranged your kitchen so the healthy snacks are front and center? Put the less healthy stuff out of sight in a harder to reach spot. You could even do meal prep on Sundays so you have healthy meals ready to grab and go throughout the week.
Oh, I love that. Meal prep is a lifesaver.
Yeah.
It's like you're setting yourself up for success before you even have to make a decision. And that applies to any goal, right?
Mhm.
Whether it's work, relationships, health, whatever you want to improve.
Absolutely. If you want to read more, keep a book on your bedside table, want to practice guitar, leave it out in the living room where you'll see it every day. It's about making those small tweaks to your environment that make it easier to do the things you want to do.
Makes sense. But even with good habits in place, I feel like it's still so hard to stay focused in today's world. There's just so much vying for our attention, from social media to emails to like the constant stream of news. How does DeWinter address this whole distraction dilemma?
Well, she talks about Cal Newport's work on deep work, which is all about prioritizing focused, uninterrupted work. It's that state of deep concentration where you're really able to produce your best work.
I've heard of that, but honestly, it feels like a mythical land to me. I'm such a multitasker, always jumping between things, checking my phone. Is there any hope for people like me?
There is. But it takes, I think, a real shift in mindset and a commitment to creating those boundaries. Newport argues that multitasking is actually a myth. Our brains aren't designed to do multiple things well at the same time. Every time we switch tasks, there's a cognitive cost.
Really? I always thought multitasking was a good thing. Like it meant you were super efficient.
It seems that way, but the research shows that it actually makes us less efficient. We make more mistakes, it takes longer to complete tasks, and we end up feeling more scattered and stressed.
Wow, that's eye-opening. So instead of trying to juggle everything at once, it's better to just focus on one thing at a time, give it your full attention, then move on to the next thing.
Exactly. It's about being intentional with your time and energy. And to do that, you need to create boundaries. Schedule dedicated blocks of time for deep work, turn off notifications, put your phone in another room, and let people know you're not to be disturbed.
That's great advice, but it sounds so hard. Like turning off my phone for a whole hour, that feels almost impossible.
It's definitely a challenge, but the results are worth it. When you can truly focus on one thing at a time, you'll be amazed at how much more you could accomplish and how much better the quality of your work will be.
Okay, I'm willing to give it a try. So we've covered sleep, habits, deep work. What's next on this roadmap to success?
Well, we've talked a lot about the practical strategies, but DeWinter also emphasizes that real lasting success is rooted in something deeper: values. She argues that these values act like a compass, guiding our decisions and actions, and making sure that the way we pursue success is aligned with who we truly are at our core.
I love that analogy of a compass. It's not just about reaching a destination, it's about making sure you're heading in the right direction in the first place. What are some of the values DeWinter talks about?
She highlights four core values that she believes are essential for success: courage, gratitude, optimism, and personal responsibility. Each one plays a really important role in shaping our journey and ensuring that our pursuit of success is meaningful and fulfilling.
Okay, let's unpack those values and see how they fit into this bigger picture of success. Okay, so right before the break, we were getting into these four core values that DeWinter highlights: courage, gratitude, optimism, and personal responsibility. It's really interesting to think about how these values actually connect to success.
I think a lot of people think about success in terms of those external achievements, the job title, the money, the accolades. But DeWinter is arguing that true success is so much deeper than that. It's about building a life that's aligned with your values, with who you are at your core.
Yeah, it's like those external achievements are great, but if they're not rooted in something deeper, something more meaningful, will they really feel fulfilling?
Exactly. And that's where values come in. They provide that foundation, that guiding force that helps you make choices that are in line with what truly matters to you. So she starts with courage.
Which is interesting because when you think about success, courage isn't always the first thing that comes to mind.
Right. But DeWinter makes the point that embracing challenges and, even more importantly, seeing setbacks as learning opportunities is absolutely essential for growth.
Oh, totally. It's like that growth mindset we were talking about earlier.
Mm.
Instead of letting failures derail you, you use them as fuel to get better.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that those failures are actually valuable feedback. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about acting despite your fears. It's about knowing that those challenges are going to ultimately make you stronger.
And I love that she includes gratitude as one of these core values. It might seem a little out of place in a conversation about success, but
I know, but it makes so much sense when you think about it. It's so easy to get caught up in what's wrong, what we're lacking, what we haven't achieved yet. But gratitude is about shifting that focus to what we already have, to those little joys and accomplishments, to the good things in our lives.
that's like choosing to focus on the flowers instead of the weeds.
Right. Exactly. And when you cultivate that sense of gratitude, it changes your whole perspective. It helps you stay motivated, it builds resilience, and it makes the journey a lot more enjoyable.
I love that. And then there's optimism, which seems like, a pretty obvious ingredient for success.
Yeah. Yeah, you'd think so, but it's more than just like positive thinking or having a sunny disposition. DeWinter emphasizes that it's about maintaining a belief in a better future, even when you're facing difficult times.
It's like that saying, this too shall pass.
Yeah.
Even when things are tough, there's this underlying sense of hope that things will eventually get better.
Yeah, it's about having faith that things will work out, that you have the ability to overcome challenges and create a better future for yourself. And then finally, she talks about personal responsibility, which I think is where it all really comes together.
So how does personal responsibility fit into this whole success equation?
Well, it's about recognizing that we have the power to shape our own lives. We're not just victims of circumstance, we have choices, and those choices determine our path. It's about moving from a passive mindset to an active mindset, from this is happening to me to I'm going to make this happen.
It's so empowering, right? It means we're not limited by our past, by our circumstances, by other people's expectations. We get to choose our own adventure.
Exactly. And it can feel a little scary at first to own that level of responsibility, but it's also incredibly liberating because it means you're not just along for the ride, you're the one driving.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive. From defining our own success to cultivating ambition, developing a growth mindset, mastering effective learning, harnessing the power of stress, prioritizing sleep, building habits, embracing deep work, and grounding all of that in a strong set of values. What stands out to you from all of this? What are you going to take away from this conversation?
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that success isn't a one-size-fits-all formula. It's a journey, a process of continuous learning and growth, and it looks different for everyone. The key is to find what works for you, what resonates with your values, and to keep experimenting, keep adjusting, keep moving forward.
And that can feel overwhelming, right? It's like, where do
Right.
I even begin?
I think it's about starting small. Pick one thing that really resonated with you and focus on that. Maybe it's setting a SMART goal. Maybe it's starting a new habit. Maybe it's carving out 30 minutes a day for deep work. Whatever it is, just take that first step.
Yeah. Small, consistent actions can lead to big results over time.
And don't be afraid to ask for help. Find people who support your goals, who can offer guidance and encouragement along the way.
It's so true. We don't have to do this alone. Okay, as we wrap up, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. If success is really about lifelong learning, what's one skill or area of knowledge that you would commit to mastering this year? Something to think about as you continue on your own journey of growth and discovery.
Such a good question. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
We hope you found it insightful, and we're excited to see what you achieve. Until next time, keep learning, keep growing, and keep diving deep.